Welcome to Love Lies Chronicles.
I'd really appreciate your comment. It helps me understand if you enjoyed the story and how I can improve in future ones. I was plating chicken fajitas when my wife walked in and set her phone face down like it was a loaded weapon. The smell of lime and peppers filled the kitchen, and for a second I thought maybe dinner would cut through the frost that had been building all month. Then I heard the vibration on the counter, that long smug buzz that means a voice message, and she smiled in a way that didn't include me. I'm Daniel Trent, 38, a project manager in Austin, Texas. Tuesday night, 7:18 p.m. The exact minute I realized my marriage had developed a third voice. It belonged to her older sister, Carla, freshly divorced, suddenly wise, and apparently holding office hours inside my house. Carla had been everywhere lately. Not physically. She lives 2 zip codes and a personality type away, but her phrases kept arriving like packages on our front step. Find yourself. Set boundaries. Keep some mystery. They didn't sound like Marissa. My wife used to talk about goofy things, small wins, the office coffee that tasted like potting soil. Now she quoted studies she never read and therapists she never met. Sentences started with her sister's name like citations. Carla says. Carla thinks. Carla warned me. The credits rolled before the movie even started. Routines began dying quiet deaths. Friday movie nights turned into the girls are doing mezcal flights. Saturday morning coffee on the porch became a 9 a.m. Pilates class that somehow required false lashes and a new perfume she never wore for me. We used to trade playlists on the drives to the grocery store, arguing about whether 80s synth had a soul. The past few weeks, she insisted on separate cars because it's more efficient. Funny how efficiency only ran one way. I tried not to read into it at first. People change. Siblings lean on each other. Life gets messy. But the small things stacked up like building permits on my desk. She changed the password on our streaming account with the shrug of someone telling you the weather. Her phone went from face up to face down to glued to her palm. She started introducing me to new acquaintances as Danny. He's very practical, with a tone that made practical sound like a personality disorder. When I set the table, she'd slide her plate 2 chairs down as if even our elbows needed space. The nights stretched later. Catching up with friends, she'd say, the generic plural that hides an alibi. Once, she came in at 1 in the morning smelling like a bar I'd never been to and a perfume that wasn't hers. I asked, calm as a fire marshal, how the night went. She tipped her head, let the earring flash, and said a line that didn't belong to her at all. A little mystery is healthy. It hung in the kitchen like smoke. I nodded, like a man measuring for replacement cabinets. I was taking measurements. I noticed Carla's voice had choreography. It paused before the verdict, like a judge enjoying the echo. Marissa started using it on me. I've been thinking about independence, she said one afternoon, not looking up from her phone. Independence from what, exactly? Chores, shared calendars, the gravity that keeps a house from floating away? No answer. Just another vibration on the counter, another sermon from the church of starting over. Carla's divorce had turned her into a lighthouse for shipwrecks she hadn't survived. My wife was steering toward it like the rocks weren't real. At work, I'm paid to anticipate failure points before steel meets weather. You don't wait for a beam to groan. You run the load combinations and design for the worst case. So I ran the numbers at home. I checked the joint credit card statement and saw the new boutique charges, tiny but constant. Dress, lashes, late-night ride shares that started and ended nowhere near our street. I took a slow walk through the house and noticed what had gone missing. Her grandmother's locket from the jewelry dish, the blue weekender that always means an overnight, the spare charger she keeps in her tote when she plans not to come home early. I took a photo of the thermostat setting and put my keys in a new spot, small private tests to see who still lived here with me. There were moments when the old her tried to surface, reflexes from the life we built. She'd reach for my hand at a crosswalk, then stop like she remembered her lines. She laughed at a stupid meme I sent, and then corrected herself with a frown, as if Carla had leaned in through the camera and tapped the glass. And there were the public performances. We met friends for tacos, and when someone asked how work was going, she cut in. Daniel's married to his projects, she said with a lightness that tasted like rust. The table laughed. I smiled and changed the subject. I don't mind being a punchline if the joke is true. Lately it sounded like the setup for an exit. I started saying less and listening more. Not the passive silence of a man hoping the storm moves around his roof, but the quiet of someone who's already found the exits. I stacked my gym shoes by the door instead of in the closet. I moved my passport to the top drawer. I changed the emergency contact at work back to my brother, who never asks questions until the answers matter. None of it was a threat. It was gravity. Respect weighs something, and when it leaves, you feel the difference in the floors. The night it crystallized wasn't loud. I was chopping cilantro. She was in the living room on speaker. I could hear Carla's voice even through the muffled distance. Flat, triumphant. The sound of a person mistaking destruction for wisdom. You need space to regain your identity, the phone said. Marissa repeated it out loud, like a student preparing for a test. I looked down at the cutting board, the tiny green confetti stuck to the knife, and thought about all the projects I've rescued by respecting physics. Marriage has physics, too. You can't subtract shared time, drop intimacy, add late nights, inject another person's script, and expect the structure to stand. Loads have to go somewhere. In houses, they travel down. In marriages, they travel through you. She ended the call, walked in, and told me she'd be heading out after dinner. No details, just the announcement, like I was maintenance and she was notifying the building. I plated the fajitas without comment. She took 2 bites, scrolled, and asked if we could start splitting chores different ways because Carla says we need clearer boundaries. The word boundaries did something inside me. Boundaries aren't the barricades people build to keep love out. They're the lines that make them map-readable. If hers were moving, mine were about to be drawn in ink. I rinsed the plates and let the water run hot. Steam fogged the window over the sink. In the reflection, I could see us both in the kitchen, 2 shapes in a room that used to hum. The timer on the stove still read 7:18 from earlier, stuck like time forgot to move. She asked if I was okay. I said yes. It was true in a way that surprised me. I wasn't confused anymore. Something was off, and it had a name and a phone plan. I dried my hands on the dish towel and hung it neatly on the handle. Then I sat at the small table we bought the year we moved in and made space in my head for the conversation I knew was coming. Not to beg, to ask the only question that mattered. Where did she end, and where did Carla begin? When she left for the night, I didn't stand in the doorway. I watched the light wash across the ceiling as her car pulled out. Then I opened my laptop and stared at a blank document like it might tell me what to do. The house felt different. I added a reminder to my calendar to call a locksmith about the back door that sticks, and, without thinking too hard, another to review the accounts on Friday. I turned off her side of the porch light and left mine on. A small, unspoken line down the middle of our life. I wasn't planning revenge. I was preparing for gravity. And for the first time in weeks, I slept. Not the sleep of a man at peace, but the steady, unbroken kind you get when you finally stop arguing with the facts. The pressure didn't arrive as a single argument. It seeped into the house like humidity, making every surface tacky. The morning after that quiet fajita night, she stood at the sink with her phone on speaker, rinsing a cup she didn't drink from, nodding at instructions I couldn't hear. When she hung up, she announced she'd be working late. The calendar on the fridge said team off-site, which apparently occurs at a dim rooftop bar with a live DJ and filtered photos by midnight. I noted the new habit. She'd declare, not discuss. By Thursday, space had become policy. She moved her makeup bag to the guest bath and told me she needed a separate area to reset between energies. I nodded like a contractor humming at a blueprint. I saw what the framing would become. She began using managerial language with me: alignment, capacity, bandwidth. I don't have bandwidth for dinner, she'd say, opening a delivery app while I stirred a pot I'd already committed to. If I set 2 plates, she'd slide one into the cabinet with the same flat efficiency she applied to a spreadsheet. Friday was girls' night, which now included a revolving cast of single coworkers who tagged Carla in their stories like an honorary mascot. She left in an outfit chosen for a room lit by phone screens, not by the lamp I turned on in the entryway. When I asked where she was heading, she did the thing with her lips: press, inhale, perform. Daniel, asking for an itinerary is controlling. Calmly, I asked, is letting me know when you'll be home also controlling? She shrugged her purse onto her shoulder. Carla says partners should avoid surveillance dynamics. I held the door for her anyway. She started picking fights on purpose, and not even clever ones. The laundry wasn't folded the way that sparks calm. The dishwasher was loaded, without respect for flow. She'd step into the living room, glance at the TV, and ask if I planned to spend another evening numbing out. I'd turn the volume down and say, "Sit with me, and we won't numb anything." She'd check her phone and answer, "Carla says routine kills desire." The word desire used to be ours. Now it was focus grouped. On Sunday, we met my brother for lunch. Midway through chips and queso, she teased me about being married to Gantt charts. It landed wrong. My brother gave me the look that asks a question without asking. I let it be the unfunny thing it was. On the drive home, in separate cars, she sent a text that said, "You were moody." Carla says social withdrawal is a manipulation tactic. I pulled into our driveway and stared at the message until the engine's ticking slowed. Then I replied, "I'm here if you want to talk like adults." Her late nights multiplied. So did the proof that these weren't accidents. New rideshare routes zigzagged across town, always with a stop near Carla's condo and another in a neighborhood with valet stands. She changed her phone's lock screen to a motivational quote, "Choose yourself." That's when the mockingbird that lived in the tree by our bedroom window learned a new call, her phone's notification tone. It woke me twice at 2 a.m. The first time, I rolled over. The second, I got up, made coffee, and put on a load of laundry because the house was quieter when machines did the talking. Monday morning, I asked the questions I'd been avoiding. I poured her a cup and slid it across the counter. "What's going on with us?" She pinched the bridge of her nose like I was a migraine. "Nothing is going on. I'm just reconnecting with myself." I held her eyes. "Is there someone else?" She laughed, too quick, and shook her head. "God, Daniel. Carla said you'd go there." The answer wasn't really an answer, but it completed a square. Any concern from me would be rebranded as insecurity. Any boundary from her would be rebranded as growth. That night, she came home with a new haircut, a sharp, asymmetrical decision that looked great and felt like a flag planted on the far side of a line. She spun once in the hall, let the light catch it, and waited. "Looks good," I said, meaning it. She smirked like praise was a trap. "I didn't do it for you." "I know," I said. "You did it for you." I went back to marinating chicken and changed the subject to the weather. Carla began appearing in our social life like a chaperone none of us invited. A group dinner we'd planned with friends transformed into a joint table with Carla and one of her divorce circle companions, a woman who spoke in bullet points about post-nuclear joy. When the bill came, Marissa watched me the way you'd watch a lab mouse approach the lever. I paid, as I always have, and didn't mention the second round of mezcal shots I hadn't ordered. On the walk to the car, she said, "See, you're generous when you want to be." I answered, "I'm consistent." She rolled her eyes, which had become our new second language. The house responded before I did. Her scent drifted to the guest room. Her shoes formed a new little city by the alternate door. The master closet breathed easier, a relief that hurt. She posted a photo from our porch with a caption about creating distances that protect sacred energy. It gathered hearts from people who didn't know where our porch was or what had always made it sacred. 2 mugs, sunrise, silence shared without strategy. Midweek, she stood in the doorway with a bag on her shoulder and announced, "I'm going to stay with Carla for a couple nights. We both think it'll help me recalibrate." I asked one question. "What are we recalibrating to?" She faltered, half a second, a hairline crack, then found the script. "To myself." I nodded slowly. "Okay. Then I'll be recalibrating to myself here." She waited for me to argue, to plead, to promise a newer, bolder version of myself that might pass an audit a sister designed. I kissed my fingers, touched the doorframe, a habit from my dad, and said, "Text me when you get there so I know you're safe." The next day, a message, "We should make a list of expectations. Carla has a template." I stared at that sentence until the words swam. I typed back, "Our marriage isn't a workshop. If you want to talk, come home and we'll talk without templates." She replied with a thumbs up, then an hour later with a PDF titled Conscious Uncoupling, Soft Launch. It was absurd and also terrifyingly efficient. Separate finances, separate bedrooms, conscious communication windows. I saved it to a folder called Documentation, where I'd started quietly placing anything that rewrote what we were. When she did come home, it was to pack a few more things and accuse me of being cold. I offered to help carry boxes to her car. She said that was passive-aggressive. I said it was practical. She asked if I could hold space for her feelings. I said I could hold space for the truth. Then, in the doorway, I tried one more time. Do you want our marriage, Marissa? Not the idea of it. Not your sister's opinion about it. Ours. She looked past me, toward the kitchen where the light made the countertop glow. I want to be happy, she said, as if happiness were a place you book, not something you build. Then you should go find out what that means, I answered. That night, I opened the windows. The mockingbird cycled through its repertoire. Car alarm, notification ping, a scrap of a melody it learned from somewhere else. I lay on my back and stared at the ceiling fan. Pressure had done what pressure always does. It tested the structure. And now I had my readings. The span was too wide, the supports misaligned, a foreign load applied without consent. I could keep propping things up with new beams and wishful thinking, or I could accept what the numbers told me. The next phase wouldn't be anger. It would be action. I woke up on Saturday with a plan and a calm I hadn't felt in weeks. If space was the cure, then I would respect the prescription to the letter. Mirror her logic, not mock it. Give her exactly what she said she needed, only without the scaffolding of my money, my time, and my attention holding up the experiment. I brewed coffee for one, put the second mug back in the cabinet, and opened the spreadsheet I keep for complex projects. New tab. Home separation, Phase 1. First line items were practical. I logged into the bank and removed an authorized user from my cards. No warning, just boundaries. I scheduled an appointment at my credit union to open a separate day-to-day account and move my direct deposit there. I didn't touch the joint account. I froze new autopays so nothing unexpected would draft from it. Utilities moved to my name alone. Streaming services, new passwords generated by the little dice icon, copied to a note titled House. Admin, the same way I'd prepare a site log. I was matching the structure to the claim. Independence isn't real if it's subsidized. While she was at brunch with the empowerment circle, I cleaned the guest room and turned it into her starting block. I laid out her essentials in neat, respectful stacks: folded jeans, the black blazer she calls her meeting armor, a week's worth of workout clothes, basics. I placed a small toiletry bag by the pillow with duplicates of everything, so she wouldn't have to swing back for toothpaste as an excuse to linger. The weekender sat at the end of the bed like a period at the end of a clear sentence. On the dresser, I left a simple note. Here's the space you asked for. I booked a storage unit 5 minutes from Carla's place and reserved a small van for Tuesday. Not a dramatic exodus, just a tidy reallocation of volume. Then I called my gym and added early morning sessions to my calendar. If my evenings were now a moving target, my mornings would belong to me. I texted my brother a short update, taking distance. I'm good. He sent back a thumbs up and the address of a lawyer he trusts, not as a threat, but as a tool. I saved the contact and closed my messages. By afternoon, the house looked like a blueprint made real: zones, labels, paths of travel. I took pictures of the guest room setup, the condition of the living room, the inside of the fridge, time-stamped, tidy documentation. Because order calms me when emotions try to rush the gate. Then I cooked dinner for one, plated it on the smaller plate we almost never used, and ate at the kitchen island instead of our table. The change in seating was small, powerful. Ritual rewritten without drama. She came home later than expected, heels in hand, hair windblown, that new half-smile that pretends exhaustion is glamour. She noticed the guest room first. The doorway framed her like a photograph, my wife looking at a life that didn't require my permission. What's with the hotel treatment? I kept my tone steady. You asked for space. This is space, with the basics covered so you can use it fully. Her eyes scanned the stacks, the weekender, the little bag with duplicates. That old, softer part of her flickered, then shrank. This is organized. I nodded. That's my job. Carla's name hovered between us like an audit. She waited for me to scold, to make a speech about marriage and posts and the cult of chosen loneliness. Nothing came. I stepped out of the doorway and left her to it. If you need anything from the master, grab it tonight. After this weekend, let's keep our rooms separate for a while. She watched me as if I'd suddenly grown unreadable. That was the point. The man she'd been managing through provocation was clocking out. The new version ran on policies and schedules, and respect, for both of us. That night, I slept with my phone on Do Not Disturb, alarms allowed, everything else muted. I woke early, hit the gym, and came back to a house that smelled like lemon cleaner and cool air. Her door was closed. Good. 2 ships, 2 courses. Sunday, I drafted a 1-page operating agreement for the house. Practical stuff, not the performative, conscious uncoupling PDF she sent. Shared calendar for trash day, groceries split by category, car in the driveway alternated weekly. Communication in writing for schedule changes. No pop-ins after 10 p.m. If we hosted friends, we'd give the other 48 hours notice. I slid the paper under her door and returned to my own list. Mid-morning, she emerged in a sweatshirt I'd bought her 2 birthdays ago, the one with the tiny embroidered heart near the cuff. She held the agreement like it might bite. "This is cold." "It's clear," I said. "Clarity is kindness." She started to cycle through the familiar lines. "Carla says rigidity is about control," but they sounded thin, like someone reading a quote they don't fully believe. I kept my voice even. "I'm done being confused. You wanted independence. I'm making sure you really get it." At noon, she mentioned taking a solo weekend to recenter. I smiled and nodded. "Solid idea. Make it longer if you want. 2 weeks would give you real data." The mirror again. Her logic scaled up. I watched the way she processed that. She'd expected me to negotiate time like it was a favor. Instead, I was approving a full project plan with extra resources. She texted someone in the other room. I didn't need to know who. While she packed, I handled the financial split. I closed the shared shopping accounts and removed save cards. I downloaded the last 6 months of statements, highlighted recurring expenses that belonged to me alone, and transferred those autopays to my new account. I left the joint groceries and mortgage untouched. Fair share remains fair. I set up a separate cloud folder for household documents she could access from anywhere. If she left in a hurry, she'd still have what mattered. You don't build exits that trap people. You build exits that work. Mid-afternoon, a message from Carla arrived on my screen because Marissa had once added her to our family photo album by mistake. It popped up as a shared image notification, an old beach photo of the sisters, sun in their eyes. The caption read, "Finally choosing yourself, proud of you." I stared at the sentence and felt nothing like anger. Just the cool recognition of a structure being tested by foreign loads. I closed the notification and returned to my list. When Marissa rolled her suitcase to the door, I carried it down the steps without commentary. "Need anything else?" She hugged herself, the sweatshirt sleeves covering her hands. "This is happening fast." I shook my head. "It's happening at the speed you set. I just moved our lives from theory to practice." She searched my face for the old version of me, the one who'd fill the silence, throw a rope, build a bridge. I kept my hands at my sides. She left, and the house inhaled. I opened windows, let the afternoon slip across the floorboards, and walked room to room, resetting light switches like breakers after a surge. I deleted the shared playlist we never used anymore and built a new one for the kitchen. Nothing dramatic, just quiet instrumental tracks that made chopping vegetables sound like work again instead of waiting. I replaced the framed photo on the entry table with a landscape I'd shot on a mountain last year, a reminder that I exist outside anyone's opinion. Before bed, I printed the lawyer's contact and slid it into a folder labeled Options. A boundary with a spine. If she reached out, I'd answer like a professional, brief, factual. If she tried to test the edges, she'd find clean lines and no barbs. The next morning, I woke to sunlight and the quiet hum of a house running on schedule. A message blinked on my phone. Maybe I overreacted. "Can we talk?" I read it twice. I made coffee, laced my shoes, and went to the gym. When I got back, I replied with a time window from the agreement and an invitation to use it. "You asked for space. I gave you all of it." Now it was her turn to learn that space isn't just the thrill of leaving. It's the weight of what isn't waiting when you come back expecting the old gravity to hold you up. The first week after she left moved strangely fast and slow at the same time. My mornings filled themselves. Gym at 6, emails by 8, quiet breakfasts where the fork didn't scrape against anyone else's plate. Evenings stretched, but not like they used to. Without waiting for a door to open, time had fewer pauses. By Wednesday, she texted during one of our agreed communication windows. Maybe I overreacted. "Can we talk?" I offered a slot the next day. She didn't confirm. At 9:40 p.m., outside any window, the doorbell rang. I watched the camera feed instead of opening the door. She stood there in the hoodie I'd seen her pack, arms wrapped around her ribs. I typed, "Not tonight. Tomorrow at 7, as scheduled." She stared into the lens like she could will me back into the old script, then left. By Friday, the first consequence showed up like a bill. Her solo weekend turned into 5 days at Carla's. The sisters posted selfies for the first 2, angled wine glasses and captions about rebirth. Then the tone changed. A locked note story about household energy and needing alone time went up on Carla's page. Translation: 2 people who mistake noise for growth were discovering that even echoes get tired. That night, Marissa sent another message. Why did you cancel the meal plan and the skincare subscription? I replied in one line. I canceled the auto-pays connected to my card. Yours are yours, mine are mine. Independence costs what it costs. No insult, just math. 10 minutes later came a screenshot of an overdraft alert. The joint account still handled the mortgage and groceries. The rest was the price of her thesis. People started to notice, because empty chairs speak. A couple we've known since our first apartment asked why she'd missed game night. I gave them the sentence I decided on. She wanted more independence, so I'm giving it to her. No flavor added. Real stories don't need sunscreen. On Sunday, she arrived at the scheduled time in a dress I recognized from better years. She stood in the doorway of the kitchen, one hip propped against the frame like we were still flirting across a crowded room. The house smelled like roasted tomatoes and basil. I'd cooked enough for 1.5. She touched my forearm, as if skin could rewind position. You look good, she said, voice lower than casual. I stepped half a foot back and nodded toward the table. Thanks. Do you want water? Her eyes did that thing. Flicker, recalibrate, search for a softness I wasn't handing out on credit. We sat. She started with apologies that were the wrong shoes. I've just been stressed. Carla's place is chaotic. I miss the stability here. I let her finish. Then I said, calm. Stability isn't a feeling you borrow. It's a structure you help hold. Do you want this marriage, or do you want somewhere quiet to rest in between experiments? She stared at the table, then reached for my hand. I left mine on my lap. I can sleep on the couch for a while, she offered, misreading the assignment. That's not the question, I said. And I won't live in a roommate simulation. Monday brought another kind of consequence. Her boss, who's always been decent to both of us, called my cell by mistake, meaning to reach my brother, who shares a first name with me. We laughed about the confusion, and then he hesitated, the way people do when they're deciding whether to step into a minefield. Tell your family we're rooting for you too, he said carefully. Office rumor mills like dramatic arcs. I thanked him and said nothing else. 2 hours later, a mutual friend texted that Marissa had vented about controlling expectations at work. By evening, that friend had also sent a second message. For what it's worth, you've been steady. People see it. I put the phone down and went for a run until my lungs matched my legs. Midweek, the seduction angle turned into guilt. A long message arrived, typing bubbles appearing and disappearing like a heartbeat. You're punishing me. You're happy I'm struggling. Carla says you're emotionally withholding to gain power. I answered, I'm not withholding anything. I'm refusing to perform. You said you needed space. I'm protecting the space. She tried blame next. If you'd been more spontaneous, I wouldn't have needed distance. If you'd listened sooner, I wouldn't have turned to Carla. I read it twice and put the phone face down. I've learned that guilt only sticks where confusion lives. My side of the glass stayed clean. Carla's arc cracked a little by Thursday. Her daily posts about unleashed joy gave way to a 2 a.m. story about landlords and boundaries. The next morning, Marissa called during the window and asked if she could bring over a few boxes temporarily because Carla needed her space back for a while. I said the guest room was set up for her essentials, not storage, and offered the address of the unit I'd rented near Carla's place, the one with her access code. Silence. Then, I didn't think you were serious about that. Serious had become a foreign word to a person who'd considered life a rehearsal. She was meeting it now in its native soil. Friday night, a neighbor I barely know knocked to borrow a ladder. He glanced over my shoulder into the tidy living room and said, "Place looks good. When you stop negotiating with someone else's smoke, oxygen returns to the room." After he left, I stood in the doorway, the same spot where I'd watched her once come home laughing into a phone. I could feel the difference in the floorboards, the absence of waiting. The second week brought panic. She called crying, the old convinced helpless tone replaced by something raw. I hated it, Carlos. We're arguing. I don't sleep. Can I crash on the couch for a couple nights? I told her I was sorry she was having a hard time and offered two options. Book a short-term place for herself. I'd even send a list of safe neighborhoods. Or use the guest room under the same agreement we'd established. No midnight discussions, schedules respected, communication in writing. That's cold, she said. That's clear, I answered. She hung up. Her mother called me on Sunday, voice careful. We saw some posts. Is everything escalating? I gave her the same sentence I'd given everyone. She paused, then surprised me. I told her to stop listening to her sister like she's a prophet, she muttered, half to herself. Carla's good at starting fires. I just said, we're okay here. She understood what that meant. An hour later, a text from my father-in-law arrived. Need help with the fence this weekend? It was his version of a hand on a shoulder. I said yes. On Saturday, we replaced 2 posts and didn't talk about marriage. He saw the steadiness in my hammer swings. That was enough. When Marissa finally used one of the windows to come by, she came alone, no performance. She stood in the kitchen doorway like before, but there was no dress, just a tired person who'd run out of lines. I thought freedom would feel like air, she said quietly. It feels like falling. I nodded. Freedom is choices and costs. You've met the second part. She asked if we could reset, a word that tried to skip history. I told her I was open to honest work, not a reset. Work meant couples counseling with someone who wasn't a relative. It meant full transparency, schedules, finances, passwords, on both sides, or complete separation with civility and speed. She blinked hard. That used to be the moment I softened. I didn't. I'm not unreachable, I said. I'm just not a safety net. She looked around the room, the counters, the windows, the chair pulled out half an inch, like the house might argue on her behalf. She left without slamming the door. The mockingbird tried out a new sound that evening, something close to a clear whistle. Word traveled, as it always does when drama refuses to perform. The girls who had cheered her on stopped inviting her to the louder nights. It turns out empowerment loses volume when the audience sees the invoice. One of them messaged me a simple line, I'm sorry. I didn't answer. By the end of the second week, her game wasn't a game anymore. It was a set of outcomes she could see. Calm made me my own. The consequence was truth finally sitting at the table without asking permission. I didn't hear from her for 3 days after I ended it. Not a text or call, just silence, which was fine. I'd already decided there was nothing left to discuss. When she finally did reach out, it wasn't an apology. It was a list. Things she wanted back. Clothes, shoes, a coffee machine her sister had given us, a framed picture she liked. Her tone was transactional, like I was a storage unit. She'd just remembered she had a rental on. I read it twice, then deleted it without replying. I was being clear. She had made her choices with the same confidence I was making mine now. The funny thing about leaving someone who thought they were holding all the power is that the silence hits them harder than any speech ever could. I didn't answer either. Every message went into a folder I didn't open. The less I said, the louder the truth sounded in her head. I heard through a mutual friend that her sister had been shocked I'd actually gone through with it. Apparently, she'd told my wife that men never really leave, they just bluff. That was their first mistake, thinking I was bluffing. The second was assuming I'd hang around for the post-drama cleanup. By week 2, the tone of her messages shifted. First, it was irritation. You could at least respond like an adult. Then it was guilt. We had good years, you can't just erase that. Finally, desperation. I didn't think you'd actually let me go. I stopped pretending the good years outweighed the truth of who she'd become. One night, I saw her name light up my phone again. For some reason, I opened that one. I miss you, it said. 3 words she'd never used once during all the chaos she started. I stared at the screen for a long time. Missing someone is easy. Respecting them when they're in front of you, that's the hard part. And she'd failed that test long before she failed our marriage. So I locked the phone, set it face down, and went back to the book I was reading. Because for the first time in a long time, my life was quiet. And quiet, I realized, was worth keeping.
Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.